In Scripture, we are told that God made man in his own image. It is so stated not only in the Christian Bible, but also in the holy writings of nearly all enlightened people. The Jewish patriarchs taught that the human body was the microcosm or little cosmos, made in the image of the macrocosm or the great cosmos. This analogy between the finite and the infinite is said to be one of the keys by the aid of which the secrets of Holy Writ are unlocked. There is no doubt that the Old Testament is a physiological and anatomical textbook to those capable of reading it from a scientific viewpoint. The functions of the human body, the attributes of the human mind, and the qualities of the human soul have been personified by the wise men of the ancient world, and a great drama has been built around their relationships to themselves and to each other. To the great Egyptian demigod, Hermes, the human race owes its concept of the law of analogy. The great Hermetic axiom was, "That which is above is like unto that which is below, and that which is below is like unto that which is above." The religions of the ancient world were all based upon nature worship, which in a degenerated form has survived to our own clay as phallicism. The worship of the parts and functions of the human body began in the later Lemurian period. During the Atlantean epoch, this religion gave place to sun worship, but the new faith incorporated into it doctrines many of the rituals and symbols of the previous belief. The building of temples in the form of the human body is a custom common to all peoples. The tabernacle of the Jews, the great Egyptian temple of Karnak, the religious structures of the Hawaiian priests, and the Christian churches laid out in the form of the cross are examples of this practice. If the human body were laid out with the arms spread in the shape of any of these buildings, it would be found that the high altar would occupy the same relative position in the building that the brain occupies in the human body. All the priests of the ancient world were anatomists. They recognized that all the functions of nature were reproduced in miniature in the human body. They therefore used man as the textbook, teaching their disciples that to understand man was to understand the universe. These wise men believed that every star in the heavens, every element in the earth, and every function in nature was represented by a corresponding center, pole, or activity within the human body. This correlation between nature without and the nature of man within, which was concealed from the multitudes, formed the secret teachings of the ancient priestcraft. Religion in Atlantis and Egypt was taken much more seriously than it is today. It was the very life of these peoples. The priests had complete control over the millions of ignorant men and women who had been taught since childhood that these robed and bearded patriarchs were direct messengers from God, and it was believed that any disobedience to the commands of the priests would bring down upon the offenders the wrath of the Almighty. The temple depended, for its maintenance, upon its secret wisdom, which gave its priests control over certain powers of nature and made them vastly superior in wisdom and understanding to the laity whom they controlled. These wise ones realized that there was a great deal more involved in religion than the chanting of mantrams and the singing of hymns. They realized that the path of salvation could be walked successfully only by those who had practical, scientific knowledge of the occult function of their own bodies. The anatomical symbolism, which they evolved in order to perpetuate this understanding, has come down to modern Christianity, but the keys to it apparently have been lost. It is a tragic situation for religionists that they are surrounded by hundreds of symbols which they cannot understand, but it is still sadder that they have even forgotten that these symbols ever had any meaning other than the foolish interpretations which they themselves have concocted. The idea prevalent in the minds of Christians that their faith is the one and only truly inspired doctrine, and that it came parentless into the world, is unreasonable in the extreme. A study of comparative religions proves beyond doubt that Christianity has begged, borrowed, or stolen its philosophies and concepts from the religions and philosophies of the ancient and medieval pagan worlds. Among the religious symbols and allegories which belonged to the world long ago, before the coming of Christianity, are a few to which we would like to call your attention. The following Christian symbols and concepts are of pagan origin. The Christian cross comes from Egypt and India. The triple mitre from the faith of the Mithraics. The shepherd's crook from the Hermetic Mysteries and Greece. The Immaculate Conception from India. The Transfiguration from Persia. And the Trinity from the Brahmins. The Virgin Mary, as the Mother of God, is found in a dozen different faiths. There are over 20 crucified world saviors. The church steeple is an adaptation of Egyptian obelisks and pyramids, while the Christian devil is the Egyptian Typhon with certain modifications. The deeper one goes into the problem, the more he realizes that there is nothing new under the sun. A truly sincere study of the Christian faith proves beyond all doubt that it is the evolutionary outgrowth of primitive doctrines. There is an evolution in religion as well as in physical form. If we accept and incorporate into our doctrines the religious symbolism of nearly 40 peoples, it behooves us to understand, at least in part, the meaning of the myths and allegories which we borrow, lest we be more ignorant than those from whom we secured them. This brochure is devoted to the problem of explaining the relationship existing between the symbolism of the ancient priests and the occult functions of the human body. We must first understand that all sacred writings are supposed to be sealed with 7 seals. In other words, it requires 7 complete interpretations to understand fully the meaning of these ancient philosophic revelations, which we have liked to call Holy Writ. Scripture is not intended to be historical. Those who understand its literal meaning understand, he least of its meaning. It is a well-known fact that Shakespeare, for dramatic rear sons, brought together in his plays characters who had actually lived hundreds of years apart. But Shakespeare was not writing history. He was penning drama. The same is true of the Bible. Scripture leaves historians hopelessly involved in self-contradictory chronological tables, where the majority of historians will remain until the Judgment Day. Scripture furnishes excellent subject matter for debates and also ground for hair-splitting over the meaning of terms and probable locations of unknown cities. Many of the biblical landmarks now pointed out by guides were named hundreds of years after the birth of Christ by pilgrims who suspected them of occupying sites somewhere near those mentioned in the Bible. All this may prove convincing to some, but to the thinker, it is conclusive evidence that history is the least important part of Scripture. When the Empress Helena, mother of Constantine the Great, visited Jerusalem in 326 AD, she discovered that not only all traces of Christianity had already been lost, but that a temple dedicated to the goddess Venus stood on the hill now accepted as Mount Calvary. Less than 400 years after the death of Christ, there was apparently no one in the Holy Land who had ever heard of him. This does not necessarily imply that he never lived, but it certainly does indicate that the halo of miracles and supernatural atmosphere with which modern Christianity envelops him are largely mythological. Like all other religions, the Christian faith accumulated a weird collection of fantastic legends which are its own worst enemies. For they have taken the simple moralist of Nazareth, the man who loved his fellow creatures, and built around him a superstructure of idolatry which loves no one and serves only itself. As Buddha in India merely reformed the Brahman concepts of his day, so Jesus reshaped the faith of Israel and gave to his disciples and the world a doctrine based upon that which had gone before, but remodeled to meet the needs of the people who surrounded him and the problems which confronted the Jewish nation. The essence who educated Jesus were of Egyptian or Lianlu origin, and his faith incorporated the best of that which had gone before. The records preserved of him are largely allegorical, and the simple man is plunged by them into a great sea of supernaturalism. This was not entirely without purpose, however, for as Shakespeare took license with history in order to present essential truths, so it seems the historians of Jesus used the character of the man as the groundwork of a great drama. He becomes the hero of a seven-sealed story, and those Christians who have studied symbolism can gain from that story the key to the true Christian mysteries. They will then realize that Scripture is perpetual history, that it pertains to no nation or people, but is the story of all nations and peoples. It is a wonderful thing, for example, to study the life of Christ in the light of astronomy, for he becomes the sun, and his disciples the 12 signs of the zodiac. Among the constellations we find the scenes of his ministry, and in the procession of the equinoxes, the story of his birth, growth, maturity, and death for men. Again, the tortured chemicals in the retort further reveal to us the life of the master, for with the key to chemistry, the scriptures become another book. In this particular work, however, we can only concern ourselves with the relationship of these allegories to the human body. We discover that the life of Christ, as found in the Gospels, has been conventionalized until it agrees perfectly with the lives of dozens of world saviors, for all of them are also astronomical and physiological myths. All of these myths come to us out of the most remote antiquity, where the primitive races used the human body as the symbolic unit, and the gods and demons were personified out of the organs and functions of the body. Among certain Kabbalistic writers, the Holy Land is mapped out on the human body, and the various cities are shown as centers of consciousness in man. There is a wonderful study here for those who will investigate deeply and sincerely the ancient mysteries. We cannot hope to cover all the ground, but if you can gain from this booklet a key to the situation, we hope you will pursue the line of thought until you have made it all-inclusive and opened at least one seal of the Book of Divine Revelation.